that we will walk with you in it. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Pastor.
All right. The kids are going to miss it, though, because I'll tell you what, they would have been encouraged today. On your way out, let me just give you all the recap of Ecclesiastes. Everything is meaningless, and then you die. Oh, boy. Well, if you have your Bibles, I encourage you to open up to about the middle of the Old Testament, not the middle of the Bible, but roughly the middle of the Old Testament, where you'll find a book called Ecclesiastes. We're going to embark on a series over the next 4 Sundays, this one plus 3 more. So 4 Sundays where we're going to study some of the major themes in Ecclesiastes. Okay, now you'll notice that there are 12 chapters of Ecclesiastes, but we're only going to have 4 Sundays. So we're not going to go chapter by chapter by chapter or verse by verse by verse. Instead, we're going to go through some of the major themes. And today I'm going to do my best to really lay some groundwork for the next 3 Sundays. Okay? So in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, I've got just a couple of verses to start us off today. And here they are. Starting in verse 1, chapter 1, verse 1. These are the words of the teacher, King David's son, who ruled in Jerusalem. Okay, so we get authorship here. Now we're going to bounce all the way to the end of chapter 1 and read verses 16, 17, and 18. So after we found out that King Solomon, who is David's son, also known as the teacher, is writing these words, we get to this. I said to myself, look, I am wiser than any of the kings who ruled in Jerusalem before me. Little ego there. I have greater wisdom and knowledge than any of them. So I set out to learn everything from wisdom to madness and folly. But I learned firsthand that pursuing all of this is like chasing the wind. The greater my wisdom, the greater my grief. To increase knowledge only increases sorrow. Boy, that's really not so different than what I said to the kids on the way out. I mean, it seems like this is kind of a downer book, and I'll be honest with you, some of the tones of this book really are the minor notes. They really are sort of darker, and they make us feel just a little bit sad, but let me encourage you by telling you that the major truth that Solomon discovers and passes along to us is so beautiful and joyful and awesome. And so we'll get there as we go through the study. It's funny, a guy was talking about daylight savings time. If it were up to me, I know some of you are thinking, we should just get rid of that. I don't even know why we still have that. It's a dumb thing. Why do we even have it? Other states don't have it. Very few states do have it. We have it here, and I personally like it, and I would like to see it take place on a Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Roll that clock back to 10 o'clock, and that gives us more time here to preach. Before we start today, and we're going to get into what Solomon said, I just want to point out to you that we can have fun here, and we can learn at the same time. And it's not just Solomon who sets out on what I'm going to call a grand experiment. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we're going to play a little game here. Some of you love music. Some of you are music lovers. Now, depending on the genre of music you like, this may be challenging. Depending on your age, this may be challenging. But depending on whether you can hear my melodies, this may be challenging. But I'm going to do my best. We're going to play a little song. I'm going to sing a song. You're going to fill in the last lines to the song. Okay? I'm going to sing a little bit, and then you're going to fill in the lines. Here they are. This one's an oldie from Johnny Lee. Okay, if that helps. An oldie from Johnny Lee. Looking for love in all the wrong places. Looking for love in too many faces. Searching their eyes. Looking for traces of what I'm dreaming of. Man, you guys are good. Wow. That was fantastic. Are those lines? No, they're not even on the screen. Great. Good job. All right, well, let's try this one. This one's a little tougher for me because I'm not a great singer to begin with, and my voice has struggled. But anyway, let's do this. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to dance, a time to mourn. Oh boy. A time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh. A time to cry. Or weep. Yeah. To everything. Turn. All right, yeah, you got it. I'll just do one more because I love to sing, so I'm going to do one more. Just one more. Ready? How many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? How many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How are you not singing? You're one of our worship leaders and you're not singing? Da, da, da. See, I can say da, 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 and people know it's Sweet Caroline. All right. This one's just a little bit more cerebral. It's not a song. You don't have to repeat anything. But I'm going to read a passage to you, and then you're going to tell me if you know where it comes from. Okay? This passage goes like this. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms, and if it proved to be mean, why then, to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world, and if it were sublime, to know it by experience and be able to give a true account of it on my next excursion. Anybody know where that comes from? Henry David Thoreau, very good. Walden. Now, if you really want to impress me, do you know the full title? No, Walden Pond is that's. No. On Golden Pond. No, that's going to be that's going to be I can't think of his name, but the actor Henry Fonda, not Henry David Thoreau. It's Walden or Life in the Woods. And the last one today, the last one is this one. Some of you will giggle because I personally love this particular novel. I think it's fantastic, and I find lots of theological themes. So if you giggle right now, well, that's on you. This is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I busied myself to think of a story to rival those which had excited us to this task, one which would speak to the mysterious fears of our nature and awaken thrilling horror, one to make the reader dread to look around, to curdle the blood, and quicken the beating of the hearts. Okay, that's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Look, the reason I bring these up today is because here are just a couple of silly examples in our culture of where people are writing about, singing about, thinking about, endeavoring to discover truth and meaning. Okay? It's not just Solomon who's looking for truth and meaning. This has been going on for millennia. We look at the Greek philosophers. We look at the sophists. We look at so many different thinkers. We have books. In fact, if you go to any bookstore, you'll find that the greatest and largest and most populated book section in the entire bookstore is the self-help section. People are looking for truth, and they're looking for meaning in life. They write novels about it, they philosophize about it, they have TED Talks about it, and they write songs about it. Fortunately for you and me, there's a very wise king from Israel. His name is Solomon, and he too endeavored to discover truth and pass along wisdom to you and me. That is the book of Ecclesiastes. I'd like to give you a little bit of background today on this particular book, okay, on this particular season and its author and such. So here are some bullet points here for you. Israel's great king, King David, established an empire in the Middle East. Okay, David, by the way, is Solomon's father. We all know King David slew the giant, played the harp, right? David has all these different accounts. So he's the great king of Israel. And during his time, he establishes an empire. Not just a kingdom, but an empire. In fact, it was an empire throughout what we call today the Middle East. It stretched as far as we know. We're not positive its furthest reach, but what we do know is it stretched from what is now Israel into Jordan, into Lebanon, and into Syria. Okay, so this is a pretty major kingdom. And during Israel's golden years, his son Solomon became Israel's king. Okay, so David's time ends, his son Solomon takes the throne, he becomes king. Now, during Solomon's time, he is not so much known for wars and conquests and great victories. That's really not the thing Solomon is most known for. Solomon made great effort toward developing Israel's culture, to developing and enhancing Israel's culture with things like material prosperity, international trade, international diplomacy, agriculture, art, architecture. In fact, Solomon is known for building some of the grandest cities, fortresses, and oh yes, let us not forget, what building is he most known for constructing? The temple. Okay, the temple in Jerusalem. Solomon is also known for making a collection of profound literature. And Ecclesiastes was very likely written by Solomon, but I want to be clear here. It's probably written by a ghostwriter, and if that phrase is not familiar, here's what that is. If I want to tell a story, but I don't feel like I'm the one to actually put pen to paper, maybe my grammar's not great, maybe somebody else has more eloquent words, whatever that is, I would hire on a ghostwriter, and I would dictate my stories or my wisdom or my thoughts to the ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter would actually record them from my mouth. Okay? And so you're going to see some examples as we go through this book that most likely the pen on paper is a ghostwriter, but these thoughts are given almost entirely by Solomon himself. Solomon is often called in this book the teacher, and the Hebrew word that's used here for teacher is koholeth. And what it means is this: the one who gathers an assembly or the one who gathers a congregation. And so Solomon is called the teacher, but not like just a college professor, not just like a classroom teacher. He's being called somebody who gathers the assembly and the congregation. So what Solomon is going to teach is not just worldly wisdom, but it's transcendent. What Solomon is going to teach are theological truths that can be applied to our life in this world, and so they transcend this life. How many of you are like really bored right now because you feel like, oh my goodness, this is history? Okay. Thank you for your honesty. Many kings and ambassadors, we're told, many kings and ambassadors actually came to hear Solomon speak because of his wisdom. In fact, the Bible records in 1 Kings 4:24 and in 1 Kings 10:23 that other kings and other ambassadors and other world leaders, they came to listen to Solomon because he was so wise. So it wasn't just the people of Israel who recognized his wisdom, it was people around the world who recognized his wisdom. Ecclesiastes is considered one of the poetic books. And more specifically, it's considered one of the wisdom books. In fact, Rose, do you have that graphic here for us? Beautiful. Oh, okay, a little smaller than I expected, but that's okay. That's okay. If you look here, we have a breakdown on my left of the Old Testament books of the Bible, kind of categorized by color and title. And then on the right side, you'll see a breakdown of those New Testament books. And the reason I'm sharing this with you today is because, again, I don't just want to stand up here and entertain or wow you. I want you all to become biblically literate, right? The more biblically literate that we are, the more knowledgeable we are, the more equipped we are to engage the world about Jesus Christ. And if we're not here to do that, why don't we go home? So I want us to be equipped. So just a little bit of information here. The first 5 books of the Bible, sometimes called the Pentateuch, written by Moses, those are the books of the law. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. I'm trying to talk too fast here. Then we have some historical books. I'm not going to read each of those titles to you, but there are historical books. Down here in what I believe is green, we have the poetic books. The poetry are going to be books like Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. I want to focus there for just a minute because 4 of those 5 books include writings from Solomon. Solomon, as far as we know, did not write any part of Job, but Solomon did write at least 2 of the Psalms, Psalm 72 and Psalm 127. Solomon did write most of the Proverbs. Solomon did write the book that we're studying now, Ecclesiastes. And Solomon does write a romantic book, Song of Songs. Okay? And then you get in the Old Testament to the major prophets. There are 4 major prophets. What makes them major is the length of their book, not the importance of what they had to say, but the length of their book. And then you get a whole slew of the minor prophets, and what makes them minor is the length of their books, not the importance of what they had to say. Okay? By the way, you can find posters like this and graphics like this. You can just Google them. So if this is the kind of thing that would help you, you can pull that up on your phone, laptop, computer, whatever. You can print that out. You can buy a poster on Amazon. And it's helpful sometimes to be able to categorize the Bible. Now, if you're a part of our church, you'll know that today I am obviously going into far more background than I typically do to introduce a series or even to introduce a book. I'm giving you a little bit more today than what I normally would. And I gave you one of the reasons for that a few moments ago, but there's another reason for that. And the reason is what I said in my intro. It's not only rock and rollers and troubadours. It's not only poets and novelists who are looking for truth and meaning in life. There are people all around us every day who are looking for truth and meaning in life. And I dare say this. It's difficult today. You know, a lot of us, we can get down on young people and we can say, you know, young people this and young people that and young people the other. I got to tell you, the challenge before young people today is immense. I'll give you an example of what I mean. If you're looking for meaning and you're looking for truth in life, the places they have available to go and search are countless. There are so many places they can go to find out what somebody says about truth and meaning in life. And so how do you know which of those to cling to? Who's right? For those of us who are a little bit older, consider it this way. Do you remember multiple choice tests? Okay. If you took a multiple choice test, and I know this is an oxymoron, just bear with me. If the multiple choice was only A, how would you have done on that test? Okay, most of you would have done very well. Mike might have struggled, but most of you would have really done well. If the choices were limited to A and B, how would you have probably done? Probably pretty well, especially if A was like dead on accurate and B was just like off the charts crazy. Probably do pretty well on that test. Now, I also know that students, they don't like a lot of the modern multiple choice tests where they're given 6 or 8 choices, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and all of them are reasonable. There is no, well, get rid of that one, that's just crazy. They're all reasonable. And as I recently discovered with my son Charlie, as I tried to help him with some of his homework, it's not just that they're all reasonable. Oftentimes, 2 or 3 of them are right. And so now what they want you to do is to discover which is righter. They want the rightest right, Bob. And while we say that's funny, imagine your angst, your stress, imagine your frustration if you had just taken a test that had lots of questions, because there's lots of questions in life. Each one had 6 or 8 choices, all of which sound reasonable. And you don't just have to find one that's good, you have to find one that's the best. Which, by the way, begs a question, because if there is a best, there has to be someone who gets to determine that standard. right? We talked about that in the last series. Who gets to determine which is the best answer? Because as I helped Charlie, and we failed poorly, well, we scored poorly, failed miserably, and I was angry. Now, it was just a practice assignment, but I'm going to tell you, I was mad, and I was literally arguing with a screen on a laptop. Because my answer was just as right and just as good as the right or right. People today, young and old, you not only have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G to choose from. You have A through infinity to choose from when you're looking for truth and meaning in life. And oftentimes, many of those choices, they look like they could be reasonable. And sometimes they even have hints of truth in them. How difficult it must be for people who are trying to find truth and meaning in life. That's why we as a church are going to look at least one wisdom book, Ecclesiastes. Solomon says here that he set out on a grand experiment. Oh, he didn't use that word. I used that word. In fact, what Solomon said was, I set out to learn everything from wisdom to madness and folly. Okay, that's what we read a few moments ago. Solomon says, I set out to learn everything from wisdom, and if I may, let us just apply the word truth to that for a moment. Everything from what is real and good and true that is honoring of God to madness and folly. And when he says everything from, he means all of it in between. I set out to experience everything this world has to offer. And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about what some of those things are. In fact, next Sunday, I'll be in Dallas. I get to go to a pastor's conference this week, and so Dad will be up here for the very first time preaching here at Grace. He's one of our elders, and so he'll preach next week, and he'll talk about at least what some of those things that Solomon investigated, what they were. And he'll talk about the conclusions that Solomon draws from those experiments. But that's really what this book is. It's a grand experiment to learn everything that life has to offer a human. And so if there are so many choices, if there's choices A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z, and beyond, if there's all those choices, why should we trust Solomon? I mean, why believe him? Why say that Solomon's words are weightier than any others? I'd like to answer that question for you by having you turn back just a few pages to one of the historical books, 1 Kings. Okay, 1 Kings. It comes before 2 Kings. In 1 Kings chapter 3, give you just a moment to turn there. The words will also come up on the screen here in a moment. In 1 Kings chapter 3, I think I can offer you a reason why we ought to put more weight on Solomon's words than we do on Plato or anyone else. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 7. We hear Solomon talking. Now, O Lord my God, you have made me king instead of my father David, but I am like a little child who doesn't know his way around. And here I am in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous they cannot be counted. Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours? Boy, as a sidebar, wouldn't it be nice if we had folks in our government today asking that question? I'll just read it once more. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours? Verse 10, the Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. So God replied, because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice and have not asked for long life or wealth or the death of your enemies, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one else has had or ever will. And I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and fame. No other king in all the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And if you follow me and obey my decrees and my commands as your father David did, I will give you a long life. I really want to press down on this, even if I have to abandon the rest of the sermon today. I want to press down on this because I think it answers the question, why should I give more weight to Solomon's words than I do to all the other wise folks who have lived or ever will? The first few verses of 1 Kings 3, at least that we read here, they actually give us a sense of Solomon's humility before the Lord. Did you hear the humility? It's funny because at the beginning of the service today, I kind of mocked Solomon just a little bit because I knew where things were going. Like when we read the passage from Ecclesiastes 1, when he's like, I am the wisest king ever. Nobody's ever known what I know. He didn't say it that way. He is saying that after God gifted him, after God granted him supernatural wisdom. But here what we see, Solomon, you know what, I didn't think of this before. Here's what it's like. Solomon steps into the throne room, if you will, of Israel. His father is no longer king, and some of this is just me imagining. And so Solomon, he probably walks over and he sits down on that throne. And then he asks himself, what do I, the most powerful person in all of this empire, do next? I can't fully understand that, but I have just like a small taste. As a very small taste, 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, the church was like, hey, you want to be pastor? And I was like, cool. So I came in here to Grace. I left my teaching position, and literally I walked into the office, and I sat down in my chair, and I had my table or my desk there, and as I looked at the computer, I said, okay, what do pastors do? And it wasn't just what do pastors do. I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, there was a moment of humility unlike others I had not known. Unlike others I had known. Literally to sit there and think, God, it seems to me and this church, it seems to us that you have called me to a place of shepherding your people, which is a high call. But I'm a moron. And I don't say that tongue-in-cheek or like self-deprecating. Like literally, I am not equipped. I am not up to this task. Who am I that I should sit in this seat? Who am I that there should be a title before my name? It took me 3 years to finally get comfortable with being called Pastor Rick. And so I can't fully understand what Solomon could, like, he's the king. It's a whole nation. It's the empire. Like, he's on another level, but I sort of understand. Hey, maybe you've been here. Maybe it worked this way for you. If you have children, do you remember the day you brought that child home from the hospital? Remember that day? While you were in the hospital, it was cool. It was great. While you were in the hospital, nothing could go wrong because you had all these professionals around you who were trained and they knew what to do in every emergency. They knew what to do with the simplest things, like changing a diaper. They knew what to do with all that kind of stuff. And then I remember this moment for me, and I've heard other people talk about it too. And then I went out to the garage. I got my car. I drove it around to the little U-shaped entry at the hospital. They wheeled Janine down in a wheelchair, and she was holding the baby. Janine got into the car. I was there, and the nurses, I think it was nurses, they brought our baby. They brought the baby out to the car and put the baby in the car seat. And the baby had a name. It was Grant. And they put Grant in the car seat, and they buckled him in, and they tightened the belt. And I was like, okay, this is cool. This is great. And then I put the car in drive. And literally I thought to myself, What did I think? Okay, yeah, I'll take that. Yeah. I literally thought to myself, I'm now responsible for a human life. How I drive makes a difference. Moreover, we got home and we were like, oh my goodness, they didn't give us an instruction manual. Eva did, but they didn't give us an instruction manual. She gave us a book called Baby Wise. I call it Baby Lies because it told us if you just let him cry in his bed, eventually it will stop. It did not. Here, in all seriousness, we get a sense of Solomon's wisdom. His humility. Sorry, his humility. He literally says, like, Lord, who am I? Who am I? And how unequipped and how, like, I'm going to lead your people? Who in the whole world could be up to this task? And when he's allowed to ask for something, he could ask for riches, he could ask for victories, he could ask for fame, he could ask for anything, but he literally says, I'm asking you, and I want to read it again. Verse 9, give me an understanding heart. Give me an understanding heart. Make me wise. Because understanding is wise, it's empathetic, it's compassionate, it's just. There's a lot in that word. Ooh, this feels like someone. You got it? Does this look like Trump? Hey, look, I'm not just picking on him or any candidate, but do we see the juxtaposition here? Leaders today, I don't know, because I don't know them personally, but I wonder, do they actually have humility? Because what I hear them say all the time is, you can trust me. I'm the smartest one. I'm the wisest one. I got the plan. I can fix this. That's what I hear leaders saying, which, by the way, how much hubris does it take for somebody to say, honestly, I think I should be the most powerful human on earth. You should nominate me. I should go sit in that office and make all the decisions. But what Solomon says is like, who am I? Who am I? And so, God, give me an understanding heart. Make me empathetic and compassionate, wise, discerning. And it goes a little further here. It doesn't just say, give me an understanding heart, but give me an understanding heart so that when you read the Bible, always pay attention to the so that's. The so that's always give us a little bit more. And so here we have the so that. Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. Look, I don't just want to be wise. I don't just want to be smart. I don't just want to write books. I don't just want to go to TED Talks. I don't just want to be paid to do public speaking. That's not why I want wisdom. I want wisdom so that I can lead your people righteously. I want wisdom so that I can know the difference between right and wrong, so that I can be a shepherd to your people. As we go through Ecclesiastes, I thought there's an illustration here that might be helpful. Ecclesiastes reminds me of some of my students. When I was teaching in the high school, sometimes students would be looking for a particular answer. So I would ask a question. This happens in small groups too. You ask a question, and then you see people immediately go to a source and they start looking through the pages. They're looking through their notes, or they're looking through the book, or they're looking for, and what I would find as a history teacher with my students is sometimes I would ask a question, and they would go and they would look at the Constitution. And I would have to say to them, you're not going to find the answer there. So then they would look at the Declaration of Independence, and I would have to say, you're not going to find the answer there. And then they might look at something like the Bill of Rights. Well, they might look at, the Gettysburg Address, and you're not going to find the answer there. Like, look, there are places where when we're looking for truth, when we're looking for wisdom, we can be searching only to find, you're not going to find the answer there, you're not going to find the answer there, you're not going to find the answer there. You're not going to find the answer with internet influencers. You're not going to find the answer on TED Talks. You're not going to find the answer in the self-help section of most bookstores. If you want to know truth, if you want to know the meaning of life, you're going to find the answer in one source, and the source is the Bible. It is God's Word. It is God speaking to us. That's why it's called the Word. He is talking to us. That's where we find truth. Now, you can also find truth through prophecy if it's tested. You can find truth through prayer. Absolutely. There are truth in other places, but this is a source that you can trust. As we go through the book, you'll see the question asks, what do people gain? The word gain appears 10 times. You're going to see a phrase. The phrase is everything under the sun, under the sun, under the sun, S-U-N. Under the sun comes up 28 times in this particular book. As I said before, Ecclesiastes sounds at the first hearing like it's kind of sad and hopeless. In fact, it might be compared to J.D. Salinger's A Catcher in the Rye. Okay, that's a more modern version of something that's kind of hopeless and doesn't really encourage very much. Solomon, the wisest and wealthiest man to ever have lived, he concludes that, I'm going to read this to you, he concludes that we all suffer the same fate when our lives come to an end. Therefore, whether one is rich or poor, educated or ignorant, powerful or weak, slave or free, we end up in the same state. Now, you and I might continue his logic to express that we can pour our time, resources, and effort into many things, but none of those pursuits will prevent us from our ultimate position before a holy God. Just want to finish up with a couple of thoughts here before we observe communion today. Rose, there's a little quip here. Truth sounds like, can you pull that up? Hey, I want you to take a minute. I want you to see this, but I want you to process it. The truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth. I want to give you a minute with that. The truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth. As I talk to people about the scriptures, about what God has to say about life and living in relationship with him and other such things, I hear a lot of people today who believe, no, your truth, funny they phrase it that way, your truth speaks hate. Your truth speaks hate. And I love this quote. I didn't make this up. I found it. The truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth. You see, if you accept that what God says is right and good and true, then you're automatically out of this position. Because God is not hate, God is love. And the only reason that you and I can even love is because he loved us first. But there are people today who literally hate the truth. They do. They hate the truth. And I just want to remind you that in John 14:6, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I want to remind you that in John 1, we read that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Right? And so if you are somebody who hates the truth, like it or not, you hate Jesus. If you're somebody who hates the Word, like it or not, you hate Jesus. Therefore, if you reject the truth, you reject Jesus. And if you reject the Word, you reject Jesus. That's pretty stark. I wish we had more time, but the time will not go back an hour this morning, so I have to wrap up. At least in this introductory message, I'm going to skip down here, Rose, to Ecclesiastes 12. As I said, there are 12 books in Ecclesiastes. Spoiler alert here, you know how sometimes people like to read the end of the book before they actually read the beginning? We're going to do that here for just a moment. This, by the way, will give you a little bit of insight into why I said there's probably a ghostwriter, but that's not the main point here. Ecclesiastes 12, verses 9 through 14. Keep this in mind. The teacher was considered wise. Okay, so this is the ghostwriter speaking about Solomon. Keep this in mind. The teacher was considered wise, and he taught the people everything he knew. He listened carefully to many proverbs, studying and classifying them. The teacher sought to find just the right words to express truths clearly. The words of the wise are like cattle prods, painful but helpful. Their collected sayings are like a nail-studded stick with which a shepherd drives the sheep. But my child, let me give you some further advice. Be careful, for writing books is endless, and much study wears you out. That's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. I'm going to ask you to be patient with me for just a few more minutes as I wrap up here, because I think these things are very important to our understanding of the rest of the book. So please bear with me for just a minute. You'll notice here it says that Solomon was not just a study of Hebrew truths. He didn't only restrict his study to what the Hebrew Bible said. He studied every kind of literature, every kind of proverb, every kind of teaching and wisdom that was being declared throughout the world. He studied all of those things because he really wanted to land on what is true and what has meaning. And if we're in error, I want to know these things. And so that's part of his experiment. So he didn't just limit himself to one source. He was looking everywhere at everything that people had to say. We see here it also says, Solomon sought to find just the right words to express truth clearly. So as Solomon is dictating this to the ghostwriter, he's being very deliberate and thoughtful about the words he says. Young people in particular, forgive me for singling you out, but hear this today. Please hear this, young people. As we search for truth and meaning in our world today, as we're searching for truth and meaning, we must hear the words of the living God, because he's the only source of truth. And I know you can find stuff everywhere, but it says here that Solomon, he was super careful to choose his words in a way that would express the truth to us clearly so that we could know it. Okay, so he's being deliberate. That's the point of his book. The point of his book is I did this experiment, man. I did everything. I partied. I built giant things. I had billions of dollars. I had women. I had music. Man, I had animals. I had everything. Well, not in that way, but I had horses. Like I had everything. Everything the world could offer. I had it all. And I want to tell you what I learned. And I think what he's saying is I want to tell you what I learned so that you don't have to travel the many painful roads that I traveled, roads that were littered with potholes and pitfalls. I don't want you to fall into those traps. So I want to pass along the wisdom, by the way, that God gave me. The writer here says, look, writing and reading in and of themselves are exhaustive and fruitless. Look, you can write books and you can read books, and this is not to say that you shouldn't study. That's not what it means. It means if your whole point is just to fill your head with more information, it's fruitless and it's meaningless and it's worthless and you'll just get exhausted. The whole point of pursuing truth, the whole point of pursuing wisdom is because they are painfully learned, painfully received, and painfully applied to our lives. Why should we put more weight on what Solomon has to say? Jen, you can bring your team up here. Why should we put more weight on what Solomon has to say? Here's why. Because Solomon isn't just telling us what he learned. I know they're coming up, but stay with me for a minute. Solomon told God, my wish is that you would give me wisdom. And God said, dude, I'm going to give you more wisdom than any human ever had before, and more wisdom than any human will ever have after. And so for me, if I want to hear about wisdom and truth and the meaning of life, I'm going to the dude on whom God poured it out. I don't really care what Plato said. I don't really care what David Hume said. I don't really care what Sun Tzu said. I'm going to the dude that God said, I will give you wisdom, the likes of which the world has never seen nor ever will. And so when we read Solomon's words, we're reading what God gave him. By the way, you know where Ecclesiastes appears, right? In the Bible. Which means it's true, and we can trust it. We can trust the conclusions that Solomon draws. Look, the title of this whole series is called Square Pegs, Round Holes, and Empty Hearts. Let me explain that for you. Have you all heard about trying to fit a square peg into a round hole? If you try to put a square peg into a round hole, what's going to happen? It won't fit. Now, again, because I know we have a postmodern world, some of you are smirking right now. You're going, well, if the circle's bigger than the square will technically fit. Yeah, it will. And it'll leave gaps all around it. So you go ahead and plug your circle hole with a square patch. Because the vessel's going to leak. And so when we take square pegs and try to fit them into round holes, they don't fit. I would suggest to you this, and again, I'm playing with words. This is not the Bible. This is Rick. I would suggest to you there are a few other shapes we should consider. I would suggest to you that all of us have a heart. Every one of us here has a heart. I would suggest to you that it too has a hole in it. And the hole is in the shape of a cross. And you can try to fill it with squares, and you can try to fill it with circles, you can try to fill it with diamonds. You can try to fill it with parties, you can try to fill it with women, you can try to fill it with men, you can try to fill it with alcohol, you can try to fill it with anything you want, but the only thing that's ever going to complete that heart is a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's wisdom. And when we live with and for Jesus, it puts us on a different path. It puts us on a different way. The way, the truth, and the life. Early Christians were called followers of the way. And the path that Jesus has for us, there are no pitfalls, there are no potholes. It doesn't mean there won't be stumbling. It doesn't mean there won't be pain. It doesn't mean there won't be trouble. Jesus said, oh, you're going to have trouble. But don't worry, because if you stay on the path, at the end, I'll be waiting for you.